Welcome back to Church and State with Christopher Ferrara and Brian McCall, where every 2 weeks we talk about some of the highlights or lowlights, depending how you look at it, going on in church and state. So let's start off in the nation's capital. Donald Trump has been kind of under attack from liberals for trying to clean up the District of Columbia. He has apparently talked about mobilizing under his control for a short period of time the Metropolitan Police, deploying the National Guard, in response of which Democrats are screaming he's a fascist taking over the world and illegally seizing power. Is this something the president can do? Can the president actually exercise authority? I mean, shouldn't the District of Columbia be like any state?
Well, it isn't like any state. It's the District of Columbia.
Oh, I forgot that.
So yeah, they want to pretend they're a state, and they would love to make it a state to get some more members of Congress and the Senate. But he has statutory authority over the district to do what he's doing. They know it. In fact, they were praising the idea of cleaning up D.C. before Trump got his second term. So this is part of the usual Trump derangement syndrome symptomology. Whatever Trump does, they must oppose, no matter how commonsensical it is, no matter how good it is for the people involved. They just have to oppose everything he does, which is why they're sinking beneath the waves. They're just going down with their ship.
I mean, he is right. I don't know last time you were through Washington, but it is a national embarrassment to have the capital of your country, homeless camps here and all around the major tourist sites, and crime really seemingly out of control around the city.
Yeah, and they accuse him of, as usual, everything is racist to them. So patrolling the city with federalized law enforcement is racist, according to them. We're not supposed to notice, though, that 92% of the homicide suspects in Washington are black, committing black-on-black crimes. We're not supposed to notice that. So it's racist to state a statistical fact. And it's in those wards, the heavily black wards, where most of the crime is occurring. But of course, it spills over into the other areas too. So we have Trump's Doge advisor, the young man whose nickname I will not mention, yes, beaten to a bloody pulp while going to work.
Yeah.
So it is a hellish situation in D.C. Trump's doing the right thing, and the Democrats privately admit he's doing the right thing. And there's some commentary recently on CNN admitting that there's a huge crime problem in D.C. that has to be addressed. So here and there, by the way, we're seeing breaks in the dam of the media propaganda. And even commentators on CNN are starting to come around to the fact that maybe we should be getting behind some of the things Trump is doing, because to oppose them makes us look like idiots.
The idiots that we are. Right? Yeah, it's interesting because even the mayor of D.C., Bowser, who's certainly not a Trump supporter in any way, her reaction was interesting. She sort of said to her Democrat colleagues from these other cities, all right, let's just not talk about how we got here, but let's make the most of this. I mean, we're getting a lot of resources. Yeah, our city does need to be cleaned up. So maybe she'll be ostracized just like Eric Adams of New York City when he dared to speak against the party line.
I think the members of the Democrat Party who still retain some semblance of the faculty of reason have figured out that the only way back for us is to actually start agreeing with Trump about certain things and to make those issues their issues. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to be a clown car on the road to hell.
Yeah. Yes. No, it's very true. And again, I think we go legally through this. A lot of these reporters, have no sense of history, but the relationship and the government of the District of Columbia has really changed over time. The Constitution, is, I think you alluded to in the beginning, clearly says that a federal district should be established for the Capitol buildings, and it appoints Congress as the supreme legislative authority. Congress has varied that over the time. In parts of the 19th century, there was more kind of local government. There was an appointed mayor, but then an elected council. For about 100 years, from 1874 to 1973, that was wiped out. Congress said, oh, now we're done with that, and directly ruled D.C. again. 73, it changed again. So again, even the suggestion, because Trump said, maybe we should look at the 1973 Act. It's not working out. They kind of act like this is some crazy idea. It's frankly consistent with a legal history that's gone back and forth between degrees of self-rule and direct rule by Congress.
Sure, and then Congress can just make permanent the enhanced federal law enforcement presence in D.C. by enacting appropriate legislation, appending it to whatever legislation exists.
Sure.
And he has the support in the House and probably even the Senate for that, I would think, at this point. He might even get a Democrat or two in the Senate.
You might.
As I said, a sensible Democrat at this point has got to realize our only hope is start talking common sense.
Yes.
Because that's all Trump is doing. He is now he has now a monopoly on common sense in the political arena. It's really quite remarkable to see the idiotic frenzy of these fools in the Democrat Party who simply refuse to recognize common sense issues when they see them.
Exactly. And again, it does seem to work. I mean, look at what happened in LA. It was tearing itself apart with these riots. As soon as he sent in the National Guard, they actually didn't have to do very much. It just kind of went away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything Trump does tends to work out. And that's the main problem they have with Trump, that the things he's doing will actually work.
Yes.
We can't have that.
No, of course not.
We can't have someone coming in and showing us all up to be the incompetent fools that we are. I mean, Trump just has simple solutions to common sense problems. And he implements the solutions and they work. And that drives them into a frenzy.
Yeah. Well, while he's cleaning up D.C., as we record this program, he's preparing to depart Washington to go up to Alaska to meet Vladimir Putin to see if he can bring an end to this bloody war that is just tearing apart Eastern Europe, devastating Ukraine. I don't know about you, but I when I first saw the news and saw that he was going to meet Putin on August 15th, the Feast of the Assumption, it just struck me because we know from Our Lady of Fatima there is some mysterious connection between Our Lady and Russia. She has a particular interest in the country of Russia, calling for its unique consecration. And I don't know, it made me somewhat hopeful that maybe there's going to be some divine assistance to bring some modicum of peace to this area.
Well, it's very, very difficult indeed to see how he can bring an end to this conflict with that fool that's running Ukraine right now, that dirty little dictator that we essentially installed in the revolution that the CIA orchestrated. He's getting rich. His friends are getting rich. Meanwhile, they're kidnapping family men and dragging them into cars to send them off to die in the trenches of their hopeless attempt to keep Russia from occupying what was traditionally Russian territory. That whole dispute has never been any of our business. I have no idea why we're involved. Obama saw that when Russia occupied Crimea. It's not our affair, he said. He's right. It wasn't our affair. It's not our affair. None of our business. The idea that Russia is going to invade all of Europe is ridiculous. Everyone knows it's ridiculous. So this is basically a localized dispute over borders that, by the way, were established by Stalin because these areas in the east of Ukraine were traditionally Russian territory, but he extended the borders of Ukraine to create a buffer zone. Stalin did that.
Yeah.
So the so-called sovereign nation of Ukraine is a matter of the arbitrary lines drawn by cartographers. By the way, it's an interesting aside that there's an article by a guy named Ford, and I think he's at Stanford Law School, where he shows that all of the problems of political modernity, these conflicts, these disputes over rights, the oppressions we see in the modern state system, are the result of map drawing by cartographers.
Yes.
Because in medieval Europe, you didn't have strict lines. There weren't border patrol agents. You had kings, and people were governed by kings, and the borders were indistinct. But now that we have these little containers of political power that everybody fights over, and everybody talks about sovereign nations being sacrosanct, and what really is going on here is just line drawing, arbitrary line drawing. So we're millions of people have died, potentially. It looks like it's several million people over lines on a map
yes.
that have no metaphysical significance. and were established for purposes of this conflict by one of the worst butchers in human history. These are the borders we're fighting over.
You're right. I remember it's a
I don't know how we're going to resolve it.
For a lot of my thinking. I mean, his thesis is basically that modern conceptions of sovereignty, which are dehumanized, are a merge or sort of a product of liberalism combined with modern cartography. It really is.
It's unbelievable. You step across the line and you're magically in a different country.
Yes.
And so people fight to the death over these lines drawn on pieces of paper, which is what happened after World War I, what happened at Yalta and Potsdam and so forth. All of this line drawing resulted in the death and displacement of millions of people. Well, this is what happens when you fragment what was once the unified social order of Christendom into nation states, arbitrarily contrived, cartographically established nation states based on lines on maps. This is what people die for now. They don't die for God. They don't even die for country. They die for a map.
A map. Well, exactly the mistake they made at the Treaty of Paris, where they just redrew lines on a map without any concern about the people involved. They just created countries out of nothing, lumping whole different populations together.
Yeah, and now Zelensky's saying, we're not giving up 1 inch of territory. If that's his position, he has to be removed by either an election or maybe another CIA orchestrated revolution, this time with the Trump support, with Trump administration support, because until he's out of the way, the actual will of the people of Ukraine cannot be realized. At this point, the people of Ukraine are fed up with the war. They want it to end. They don't give a hoot about whether the Donbass goes to Putin as opposed to the dictator in Kiev. What difference does it make to the average Ukrainian citizen living in Kiev? None. But problem is Zelensky. He's making the ridiculous demand that not 1 inch of territory be ceded to the Russians, which will make it impossible to reach a peace deal. I don't know how Trump's going to do it, but if he does do it, boy, if he doesn't get the Nobel Peace Prize for that one, then that prize is worthless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, my biggest hope is, that Our Lady's intervening, but on the natural side, the way he responded to Zelensky showed he knows what's going on. Zelensky said, I need to be invited. Please, let me in the room. And he basically said,
so I can prevent the agreement.
Go away. Right?
Yeah.
Let the adults talk about this. Right? Yeah.
Well, he's going to have to. There's no way this is going to end without Zelensky or the Kiev regime, whoever is running it at that time, cedes some portions of eastern Ukraine and, of course, Crimea to Putin, putting back into place the borders that were in existence before Stalin redrew them.
Yes. Well, we can pray, again, for the sake of the Ukrainians. I mean, they're just the hundreds of thousands that are suffering as a result of this. A whole generation really wiped out. Pray that will end. Well, speaking of statistics, let's turn to the church. And there was an interesting study published by two academics, and neither of these, I looked them up a little, appear to be traditionalists. I mean, they don't at all, anything called traditionalists. But they just did some social science research. Michael Rhoda of the University of St. Thomas and Stephen Bullivant of St. Mary's University basically analyzed the decline of U.S. Catholics using various survey data over the past 50 years. They published something called the Religious Transmission on August 12th. So here's some of the statistics they found. In 1973, 84% of those who were raised Catholics still identified and practiced their faith as Catholics. By 2002, this had dropped to 74%. By 2022, it had dropped to 62%. So as of 3 years ago, only 62% of baptized Catholics remain such as adults. Beyond that, actual weekly mass attendance has dropped even further. In 1973, it was 34%. It took a huge hit after the new mass came in. Dropped to 20% in 2002, is now down to 11%. Mm-hmm. So only 11% of people who say they're Catholic actually go to mass on Sunday. They concluded, based on this data, that at present, the Catholic Church is losing 9 out of every 10 children who were baptized by the time they are an adult. That's really, I mean, extraordinary. Now, Cardinal Burke referred to this phenomenon in an interesting interview with Raymond Arroyo just a few days ago, where they talked about the traditional Latin Mass and Francis's attempt to put it in a cage. And he said he gave a statistic that said of people 18 to 30, only about 20% of them, and this was an older statistic before this study, go to Mass. He said, but however, of that same age group, if of all of that age group who attend the traditional Latin Mass, 99% of them go to Mass every Sunday. So again, we need any more evidence of the effect of the Novus Ordo on the church and the positive effect of the traditional Latin Mass, right, on those who attended. Other studies have shown, 95% of Catholics who go to the traditional Latin Mass observe the church's teaching on marriage and contraception and family. 98% of them have a clear belief in the Blessed Sacrament compared to less than a majority. So, I mean, when do you think the bishops are going to look at the numbers and see reality for what it is, that they're losing the church?
Well, let's do a deep dive diagnosis here. And it begins and ends, I think, with an answer to the question, why is there a hell? Okay. So it takes a lawyer to come up with the knockdown argument. St. Alphonsus Liguori had the knockdown argument. There has to be a place of eternal punishment, not just to vindicate the divine justice, but to get the reprobate to realize that they had better follow at least the moral law, the Ten Commandments. Because if there is no eternal punishment, the reprobate soul will say to itself, well, I can do 20,000 years in purgatory standing on my head. I know God's going to let me out sooner or later, so I'll just live my life the way I want to live my life. And, if I have to put up with a lot of suffering in the afterlife for some limited period of time, okay, fine, but eventually I'll get to heaven. So if there is no hell, no threat of eternal punishment any longer in catechesis, why would anyone ultimately who is just a nominal Catholic remain such? We're not talking about doing what is good because it is good. We're not practicing, talking about practicing the things of the faith because they are uplifting, because they allow for the full flourishing of the human being. We're talking about just the naked idea of divine punishment. And John Paul II said in his book-length interview, Crossing the Threshold of Hope, that the idea of death, judgment, heaven, and hell, the four last things, eternal punishment, is gone in post-conciliar teaching. And the church now seems to say, we're okay, you're okay, all religions are more or less good. What's this nonsense about eternal punishment and hell? We don't talk about that anymore. So why wouldn't people who are lukewarm, to begin with, just drift away from the faith? And those in the traditional movement understand the four last things, and if nothing else, they're praying constantly for the grace of final perseverance. But there's no need for that, according to the post-conciliar church, because we no longer talk about the threat of hell. That at bottom is the reason most people drift away. They just don't see any ultimate incentive for doing all these difficult things, supposedly difficult things, that the church requires. And this is what Ratzinger said in his address, we've mentioned this before, to the Dallas bishops. I think it was in 1991. The idea that, well, if you have basically an upright conscience according to your own lights, then you're saved. So why impose on people the burden of being Catholic? Blissful ignorance would be the ordinary means of salvation. And people today are just living in a state of blissful ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's sort of, it extends beyond hell. I mean, I think you're right. The lack of hell, it's one of the reasons they don't like the traditional Mass. Hell is actually mentioned and our need for salvation. But it's even sort of extends to the liturgy. Like, it's interesting. A lot of, people is, well, who really cares how the Mass is? Does it really make a big difference? I mean, if we give out communion on the hand, if we're dropping all over the floor, if, some woman just comes up from the pew and opens the tabernacle, does it really matter? It's sort of that lack of hell leads to just a general malaise that nothing's really that important anymore when it comes to religion.
Well, if you're not thinking about a hell and you only have a vague notion of heaven, then what do you need religion for anyway? And this is the average Catholic thinks this way today. Well, all religions are fine. Maybe I like Catholicism for certain things, and I'll go to Mass on Easter and Christmas and so forth. It's a nice cultural thing for me to do. But I'm not saying that anyone outside of the church is in any danger of anything, or that I'm in any danger of anything if I don't go to Mass every Sunday. What danger? There's no danger. There's no eternal punishment. And heaven, well, we're all going there. I'm sure it'll be a wonderful experience for just about everybody. And with that spirit of the zeitgeist penetrating the church, in which basically, if there is a heaven, we're all going there. What's the incentive for remaining in the faith? Connor Ratzinger again said this in 1991. Why would you impose upon anyone the burden of practicing the Catholic faith? It just seems so difficult.
Well, speaking about incentive, I mean, getting back to kind of my original question, if you were a bishop, even if you didn't theologically agree with everything you just said, just on a natural level, if you'd sort of invested your life to working for this institution, wouldn't you at some point just say, this isn't working anymore? What we've been trying is utterly failing, and this is going to become extinct if we don't change course. I mean, why are the bishops not waking up to that fact?
Maybe some of them do, and they don't have the courage to act. Maybe others just don't care for the same reason Catholics just don't care. So you have a bishop who's got a nice place to live. He never misses a meal. The money is still coming in sufficiently to support him in the style to which he is accustomed. He doesn't really have any fear of hell any more than the average person in the pew does. And he's not acting like he has a fear of hell. He's certainly not talking truth to power at the risk of his own security or safety, at the risk of going to jail like people in the civil rights movement did. He's very comfortable. So those bishops simply don't care. If the money runs out after I'm gone, well, whatever.
Wow. So, I mean, it is extraordinary. It just it's interesting. The very beginning, I think Archbishop Lefebvre, for example, when he first started in a cone building the seminary, he's first thought, well, this crisis, maybe it'll be over in 10 years. Everything will go back to normal. I think it's just amazing sort of how long God has allowed to let his church suffer this chastisement of this great crisis of faith, this great crisis in the church, but never abandoning it. Again, we have to remember that. Even Ratzinger said this, maybe the church has to become very small before we get out of this crisis. Essentially, it's going to have to become a smaller church to, get through this and reemerge on the other side.
Well, now the length of this crisis rivals that of the Aryan crisis, which went on for 60 years. We're right around the same time frame with the current crisis, which Athanasius Schneider has said is the fourth great crisis in the history of the church. And obviously it will be resolved at one point or another. That's inevitable before the world as such comes to an end and we enter the last days. We haven't seen those yet because none of the elements of that prophecy have yet to be seen, such as the arrival of Enoch and Elias to oppose the Antichrist. So that, according to the Message of Fatima, there will be a period of restoration before the final period of human history and salvation history when, as the Old Testament says, God rolls up this world like an old scroll and tosses it aside. So there's a long way to go, and no one knows when any of this will happen, but there will be a restoration before the end, the true end of human history.
Well, and we know the Blessed Mother told Sister Lucy that she sadly knew that the popes would delay, like the King of France, the consecration of Russia, that, there'd be much to be suffered because of that delay, but in the end it would happen. It would be late, but it would happen. And then she gave her promise, her word, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. So, we know the outcome, which is one thing that makes, I think, it easier to get through this crisis is knowing.
Well, yeah. And
like you said about purgatory, it won't go on forever.
Right. And the request for the consecration came in 1929.
Yes.
So 2029 will be the 100th anniversary. And we know that the failure to consecrate France, as requested in 1689, to the day 100 years later, resulted in the usurpation of the Third Estate, which declared itself the National Assembly, and then the king ended up at the guillotine because he had failed to consecrate France to the Sacred Heart. So we're approaching the 100th anniversary.
He does it in his jail cell. I think.
Yeah, he does it in his jail cell. Too little, too late.
A little, yes.
And so look ahead to the year 2029.
Yes.
And I was just watching something the other day about this massive asteroid that's coming close to the Earth in 2027 within the orbit of the moon. So that could be a bit of a warning to look out for. And then it will return in 2036. There's a very hilarious YouTube video, "Oh Lord, send thy holy asteroid," where someone is playing an organ in a very impressive church, begging God to send the holy asteroid to end this insanity.
Yes.
That would certainly solve a lot of problems. I had a lawyer friend who's since passed on, God rest his soul. There was another close encounter of an asteroid about 20 years ago, I think. And he sent me an email, and the tagline of it was, "Too bad it missed."
Oh, well.
I mean, we'll have to go sometime. At least we'd have the ability to have a warning of our imminent demise to make amends with God.
Yes, that's true. Well, again, let's just pray for this meeting that Trump has, that may bring some peace, and pray for the Pope that he will, take off this or ease this persecution of the Mass that Pope Francis and his henchmen brought in. But what God's will be done, whatever He intends. We know He ultimately is the one caring for the Church, and will see that the right thing happens.
Yeah, and so far with this pontificate, I really haven't been following Vatican affairs too much because there isn't an awful lot to be alarmed about. Sure, maybe there's the same general drift, but nothing like the fiercely ideological persecutions of the infamously called dictator Pope who preceded him. So right now it's a period of relative quiet in the church. We'll see what happens in the months to come, but we can certainly say, as we sit here today, there's been a marked improvement in our situation in terms of at least continuing positive harms of the church. But that remains to be seen. Maybe by next week we'll have something more dire to report, or in 2 weeks from now.
It is a low bar, but it is
very low bar.
Well, no scandals or crazy things are coming out lately.
Yeah, and there's been a complete cessation so far of the airplane magisterium, where so much of the mischief ensued.
Very true. Well, thanks for your thoughts, Chris, and God willing, we'll visit again in 2 weeks and see where we stand then.
Okay, take care. God bless until next time.